So Sam, I do have a somewhat facetious comment. Something. A man cannot be unequally yoked. You cannot serve both God and
Pope.
Ah! Damn it!
Dang it!
I should have said you cannot serve both God and patriarch.
Not as
Oh,
good.
that doesn't rhyme, making it less right.
Okay, yes, but how do you deal with the Ukraine-Russia split?
You wait for them to hash it out, and eventually they will, or they'll just kind of forget it ever happened.
Well, if Orthodox priests would stop using holy water on Russian intelligence equipment, maybe they would
True.
stop messing with our elections.
Russian intelligence equipment, that's a very benign way of saying nuclear weapons.
Yes. Well, yeah.
Fun fact, I actually found out there is a patron saint of Russian nuclear weapons, Saint Seraphim.
What is his deal? And
I have no idea.
Can we make this into a Call of Cthulhu game?
Absolutely.
I'm literally writing this down. Patron saint of nuclear weapons.
I'm looking it up.
I read his Wikipedia page. Like, super great guy. Like, it actually fostered a lot of I think dialogue with Orthodoxy and other denominations. Like, ostensibly very holy man, but for some reason he became.
What's his name again?
Saint Seraphim of Zaro.
Seraphim.
Saint Seraphim devoted his life to peace. Now he prays for final peace, eternal peace.
The Pax
No, it's
Romana.
peace through force.
Pax Nuclearana, more like.
Yeah, he wouldn't be praying for he wouldn't be praying for Pax Romana. That's too close to the Catholic Church.
Oh, burn.
Roman Catholic.
Damn it. You
get started.
Now, one thing. So 4 days ago, a committee of ecclesial law in the Orthodox Church convened in Moscow and actually began debating ending the blessing of nuclear weapons. So, Brevin,
progress.
Finally. Okay.
Wow. Yeah. I'm just looking at this too. That's actually so awesome.
Yeah. I mean, it takes time. Like, you know how many Orthodox priests it takes to change a light bulb, right?
Seraphim. What did he do?
Change?
Yeah. Exactly.
Hey!
I feel like Saint Seraphim wouldn't have consented to this. I feel like
there's no way.
It's just because his saint name, it means fiery or burning. Like, this isn't his fault. Seraphim are fiery angels with the power to purify the sinful. So purifying fire from heaven equals.
It'll purify the land real good.
This is seriously a Call of Cthulhu campaign, actually.
Absolutely. His relics were launched into space in October 19, 2007.
Yes!
Please make this Call of Cthulhu.
To some Russian intelligence targeting platforms. That would be the actual most epic thing.
Why would you launch somebody's relics into space?
Saint Seraphim. Gotta rain down fury, purify the earth.
The Orthodox are weird, man.
I know that.
Man, okay, so for their cool space nuke project, the Russians get a patron saint named Seraphim, burning angel of death, and then we just get hey, what if we called it Star Wars? Reagan said, and we're all like,
that works.
Well, I mean, we named it after our patron saint too.
We truly are a godless
George
nation.
Lucas?
That's all that proves. Why couldn't we name our missile platforms oh yes, this is the Billy Graham platform, down to spread revival of flame. I don't
He's calling down tongues from heaven, flaming tongues from heaven.
Yep. It's Pentecost forever. It's Pentecost, but it ignites the atmosphere.
Have you guys seen the YouTube video where they put "Let the Bodies Hit the Floor" music over the one charismatic dude that's mass slaying people in the spirit?
Let's say no. Let's say you put that in the chat right now, and then this will definitely go in the podcast notes.
Oh, absolutely. Here we go.
Okay, and on that note, speaking about a podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Problem with Reading. I'm Brevin.
I'm Steven.
I'm Sam.
And I don't know how much of the preceding conversation you will hear, but rest assured it involved Saint Seraphim, the patron saint of nuclear weapons, nuclear weapons, and lots of Orthodox versus Catholic stuff, and Billy Graham is a missile platform now. Anyway, it was all very
glorious.
good. But Sam, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm living the life. Doing fine.
Which life?
Mine,
Oh, okay.
I think.
I hope so.
There's no way to ever know.
Just got to live
Ready?
your life, man. You know.
Is it my life?
It's my life. And it's not. Okay.
Yes, Sam. This is your life. Are you who you want to be?
I don't know. Am I an individual, or am I just alluding myself to the something modern project Nietzsche?
What
great
character
man.
are you inhabiting? Are you the bureaucratic manager, or perhaps the consummate estate? What are you?
Oh, I'm the bureaucratic manager. I work in 2 bureaucracies at once, so it's like,
oh yeah,
straight bureaucratic manager. Yeah.
Break those chains, Sam. All right, Steven, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, although I'm a little disappointed that Sam didn't catch my Switchfoot reference. So there's that.
Man,
but
still a thing. I get their ads on Facebook, but I haven't listened to them in years.
I started listening to their latest album, 2018. I forget what it's called, but it's quite good. Surprisingly good.
So, what was the album with Dark Horses that was kind of like more like
Vice Versus?
Vice Versus. That was the last one that I liked, and then the one after that was like kind of Beach Boysy, and I didn't like that
Fading
at all.
West. Yeah, Fading West. I wasn't a huge fan. This just a sec. Let me.
And then I haven't listened since. Now I listen to basically parody songs on YouTube and just play them on repeat for 6 hours a day in the background of whatever I'm doing.
As you should.
Ansley is concerned. She thinks my aesthetic is parody music, which is probably true.
It's
very ironic
true.
and postmodern. David Foster Wallace would be ashamed of you.
Hey, I am just embracing the absurdity or something, like your existentialist that you like so much.
I mean, yeah, but
all of the barbs coming out today.
Well,
McIntyre's over. No more civil discussion.
It's the end of McIntyre. Like, what's gonna hold us together?
Nothing, this is it. This was our common narrative, guys. After this, we only have rights-based language. We know how far that gets you.
They're fictions. No, but for real. Okay, never mind. But yeah.
Also, the album is Native Tongue.
Native Tongue.
Yeah, quite good. Would
Isn't
recommend.
that a? Oh damn! What's that other band? Or no, it's just called Native. American something.
American authors?
Yeah, nope, definitely not. American Native album. Native by One Republic. It's a One Republic album. That was a good one. Actually.
Gross.
Excuse you.
I don't know. Like, I saw a One Republican concert once, and they're just the guy just struck me as just the biggest. Just I don't know. What's the good word for someone who's full of themselves?
Imbecile.
Pompous
imbecile.
Perfect.
Anyway.
Oh, that was a lot of good material right there. We're good. We're done here. Let's just sign off, boys.
we are really not talking about a whole lot. But in keeping with tradition, which is supremely important, as we know, let us move on to the next practice and ask Stephen, what are you drinking right now?
I'm glad you asked. I'm drinking the last of my homebrew, a raspberry stout.
Nice.
It is quite good. Yeah. Although it's unfortunate. This particular one, we tried doing a secondary fermentation to get the raspberry taste in, and so we dumped in a bunch of frozen raspberries, and it got the taste in really good. But unfortunately, we didn't consider that we might need to filter all the raspberries out, and so it has like a bunch of just like really, really old soaked raspberry chunks left in it. And so honestly,
so
it tastes
have like a beer smoothie.
I was about to say that. Sounds smoothie.
Like we got given the way you siphon stuff out, it avoided most of it, but inevitably some stuff gets through, and I'm drinking like the last of it, which means that's where most of the stuff is through. So yeah, there's like a nice little layer on top of just like raspberry
scum.
Yeah, pretty much. It doesn't taste bad. It just feels really weird drinking it. And on the whole, I would rather be without that part.
Nice. How about you, Sam? What are you drinking right now?
Tap water.
Nice. Good old Seattle tap water. How I miss it.
It's good. It's good stuff. Better. Is it better than Boston tap water?
Probably. I mean, everything on the East Coast is kind of old and terrible. So
yeah.
Doesn't Boston tap water taste like the mafia and Catholicism?
It
and
does.
Sam Adams.
Touche.
Yeah.
Well, that is a good point. It tastes like Sam Adams without all the good stuff. It's like what?
It's
Yeah.
like really, really bad Sam Adams.
Yes. It's like Sam Adams, but what if it didn't taste like beer and also was an alcoholic? Anyway, so for myself, I'm not drinking anything currently. I'm parched, as it were. But earlier, I did have a lovely margarita made with stuff from Trader Joe's, which was delicious. Plus, we added a little bit of blackberry wine to it, which just gave it this lovely, summery, fruity flavor. In addition to the lovely margarita tang, and I made a nice rim of salt with pink Himalayan salt. Not out of any like aesthetic things. It was just we don't have any like chunky salt crystals besides that. So anyway, it turned out very well.
Nicely done.
Yeah. All right.
Sounds
And with that, I believe we do move on to McIntyre chapter 18.
This is it, everyone.
This is it. There is a chapter 19 that's kind of a postscript, and there's not a whole lot of new material there. It's mostly just him responding to objections. So I'll probably just do this and then call it good. Although I did read chapter 19 for the record.
Ooh, I still need to read chapter 19. I totally forgot that it was there.
I
We also need to go over the bibliography and index. We need to have the special chapter.
Right, we were going to have an episode on that.
That's true. Let's see if we can squeeze that in before Sam runs off to England to marry
Absolutely
to Bonnie England.
To go to Oxford.
Yes,
indeed.
Where he'll learn how to be better than all of us.
He'll come back wearing breeches and high socks and like a cravat. It'll be great.
It's gonna be great.
And tweed, lots of tweed.
Lots of tweed. Like tweed cravat, actually.
What even is a cravat? I
actually have no idea. I was
it's like
just laughing
a
so I
precursor
could
to
feel
a
good.
tie. Just look it up while I do the summary because you guys should know what this is. All right. And
oh
by the
dear
way,
God!
I basically.
Oh wow! What? Don't wear that, Sam. Don't do that.
Actually, can one of you guys search tweed cravat? And if it exists, we will put it as the picture for this episode. Okay. Now,
I love the internet.
Be quiet. I'm going to do this. Okay, so I stole this mostly from somewhere else. So I didn't really write this, so no credit to me, but here's the summary of chapter 18. McIntyre returns to the question that he posed in chapter 9, which is, in light of the moral disorder that we practice today, which of the two logical alternatives we can accept? There's either Nietzsche's option, which is to just burn it all down, it's all bad, which is true, it is all bad, but need we burn it all down? And the other alternative is Aristotle. McIntyre argues that the cogency of Nietzsche's rejection of contemporary moral values, quote, did not necessarily extend to the earliest Aristotelian tradition, end quote, which differed crucially in its placement of rules within a larger scheme of virtues. So essentially, early Aristotelian tradition escapes the problems that everything that came after it falls into, which is why we can go with Aristotle instead of Nietzsche. So on the contrary, quote, against that tradition, the Nietzschean polemic is completely unsuccessful, end quote, because of the success of the rational case for a moral tradition outlined in chapters 14 and 15. Nietzsche's claim rests on the figure of the Übermensch, or the great man, who recognizes that moral language is a mask for the will to power and in fact has no objective authority, and thus decides to eschew human relationships and transcend the social world and only to dictate his moral law. And he writes about this in very moving terms and how the Übermensch is entirely alone. He has no relationships, and that in fact is the mistake that causes us to know that it's an untenable philosophy and false in terms of human ontology or whatever. So McIntyre argues that in light of his account of the virtues, quote, it is the isolation and self-absorption of the Übermensch which thrusts upon him the burden of being his own self-sufficient moral authority, end quote. So not only does Nietzsche's argument fail against the Aristotelian tradition, but it is in fact from that perspective that we can best understand the mistakes of the Nietzschean position. So the concept of the great man actually just represents a further extension of individualism. It's the, quote, final attempt to escape from its own consequences, end quote. The core debate is between individualism and Aristotelianism. And the differences between these extend to the understanding of human action itself. And McIntyre reiterates his conclusion that centuries of effort have failed to provide any rational and defensible statement of a liberal individualist point of view, while, quote, the Aristotelian tradition can be restated in a way that restores the intelligibility and rationality to our moral and social attitudes and commitments, end quote. He then goes into a couple potential objections or weaknesses of the argument, but I'm going to focus on what he talks about the Marxists, which is the tradition that he came from. And he says that Marxists contend that the key moral conflict of our age is between liberal individualism and some version of Marxism. But McIntyre argues that this is actually mistaken because when Marx Marxists are pushed one level back, they always fall into, quote, relatively straightforward versions of Kantianism or utilitarianism, end quote. Furthermore, whenever they gained power, they either became Weberians, sort of the bureaucratic types like Trotsky, or Nietzscheans like Lenin and sort of more burn stuff down. He thus argues, quote, not only that Marxism is exhausted as a political tradition, but that this exhaustion is shared by every other political tradition within our culture, end quote. And he concludes by noting that despite the danger of drawing precise parallels between historical periods, there is one to be drawn between our modern period and that which the Roman Empire declined into the Dark Ages. One crucial turning point of that period was when people ceased to contribute to the good of the state and, quote, ceased to identify the continuation of civility and moral community with the maintenance of the state, end quote. They turned instead to constructing communities in which moral life could be sustained. And he says that we've reached this turning point, that we have to start building these moral communities where moral life can be sustained and intellectual life is, because the Dark Ages are here. And he ends with this great quote upcoming. He maintains that the success of that effort through the Dark Ages teaches us that there is ground for hope, but that, and the final quote, this time, however, the barbarians are not waiting beyond the frontiers. They have already been governing us for quite some time, and it is our lack of consciousness of this that constitutes part of our predicament. We are not waiting for a Godot, but for another, doubtless very different, Saint Benedict, end quote. And I think if there's one thing that we can all agree on, is that the Saint Benedict of our time finally come is President Donald Trump.
Here, absolutely. That is a very false thing to say.
Are you seriously going to end this entire 7-month excursion like that?
I was getting all sentimental in the back of my head of like, Saint Benedict. Okay, Brevin, wrap it up. Take us home. It's gonna be great. Wait, what?
I could just hear Sam brain shut off for 2 seconds as I was trying to comprehend what I just said. I am completely kidding.
I was like, oh man, I kid you not, my jaw hit my desk in just shock that you ended like that, you monster.
You actually blacked out for like 3 seconds.
I mean, I have my problems with Benedict, but no.
Also, again, David Foster Wallace is very disappointed in you for ironizing a particularly wonderful moments. I said it. I don't care. I got to stick with it.
Like third time today already. He's back.
I'm disappointed in you.
I'm not sorry.
I guess there's no way that I can take that moment back, huh?
You can.
You could delete it in post.
It's true. I could edit it, but will I? Will I? No,
not
I
going
won't.
to. He's not going to do that, is he?
All jokes aside, I have some comments. Obviously, some commentary that's less substantive and more social in nature. But Sam, what are your thoughts having reached the end of this long?
I need a minute.
Okay, Steven.
I'll try to buy you some time, Sam. I'm still processing everything. I'm still trying to just kind of get my grips together. But I'll see what I can do. So first, I do like how he ends on a grim note, but not an entirely despairing note. It is potentially a bit of a dramatic flair to say kind of the barbarians are running the show, but I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I mean, 3 centuries of conducting ethical dialogues in a particular way that is completely antithetical to the way ethics should be talked about, that leaves its mark. And I don't think he's wrong when he says like this is causing us to not be able to have these really important ethical discussions. And therefore, if minds as brilliant as Jane Austen and what's his face weren't able to push society back into having ethics in the proper context, kind of what hope have we? And as kind of stated in the previous chapter, I think in the previous couple of chapters, a softer retreat is needed to kind of form intentional communities to be able to carry those on until society is ready to receive it back. Kind of a grassroots movement is needed, not a top-down approach, because a top-down approach will just simply never happen. So I think one common critique of a lot of philosophy is that it just has no real-world basis. There's no, it's just a bunch of people kind of sitting in armchairs, smoking their pipes, jawing about abstract things. But this is a very practical, no, we need to form these communities, otherwise it's only going to get worse. And I think McIntyre would look around now. In fact, I mean, he does at least at the conference. And he says, like, yeah, I told you guys, this is how bad it is. So
Okay.
that's my hot take. I think it's a very apt description and prescription.
So I have a specific question for Stephen. But before we do that, Sam, it's your soapbox.
Yeah, I've got a few points. First of all, I totally agree with Stephen when you're talking about how a grassroots movement is necessary. And that's kind of been my wrestling point with McIntyre this entire book is he brings up Aristotle, and I'm sorry, but I still have trouble conceptualizing Aristotle in the modern age and what it would mean to entirely form these communities. I think that in order to solve the problems he's identified, you need to make a change. You need to make you need to restrict yourself in some way. You need to pull off in those communities. But I'm still unclear on exactly what they look like. And maybe I just need to read the Rule of Saint Benedict again, and maybe that will show it to me. But I don't know. I'm not convinced he does the full practical work needed to show exactly what those communities look like. In addition to that, there is a community that tried to do this. Granted, it wasn't deferring to Aristotle, but they were deferring to at least an interpretation of Christianity, and that was the evangelicals in the 70s. That entire cultural movement of cutting off. And while I think that they lacked some of the basis that McIntyre would like them to have, I fail to see why the consequences that we saw from that, meaning that they just became so totally detached from society that they were unable to become agents of any kind of change in that truth and even God from time to time. So I guess I'm worried from a practical standpoint that by cutting off, and this might be my inner evangelical coming out, a community trying to emulate St. Benedict might lose the ability to even speak to that other side and engage in any way with them, and therefore even in pulling back and waiting for a while before bringing it back into the world, they might not be able to bring it back into the world whatsoever. And so I just worry about that a little bit, and I worry that when we've seen communities cut off like this, they often come into the world either doing nothing, they fall back into even worse things, or they do very worse things for themselves, or they do bad things for the world. So there's that hesitation for me. But one positive point is I really love his attack on Marx, and not just because, shockingly, I'm not a huge fan of Marx, but I like his method that he employs with peeling the layers back. I'm not sure if did he talk about Marx earlier in this book before here? Like
He's
in
talked
this
about
way?
Marx quite a bit.
He's talked about Marx a bit. Okay, I thought he had. I was mixing this up with his other book that I was skimming through. But I love the method that he uses here, where he looks at Marx, and Marx in our modern age especially is seen as kind of almost a prophetic figure, and seen as somebody who gives a narrative that we can live into. And I like how when he peels the layers back, he's able to defer to it, or he's able to show how it's just deferring to all these different manifestations of the modern experiment. I think that it was more interesting for me than his attack on the American society, because American society doesn't even have any layers to peel back. It's just there's nothing there. And Marx, there's a bit, I think there's a little bit more sophistication that it's very fun to see him kind of pick apart. So that's my take. I like it. It's the same thing I've been repeating this entire time. I'm not fully sure what it would look like to do that, and I'm not sure if it would be entirely successful. I'm not sure if the Aristotelian project can be fully restarted in the way that is necessary in order to save us from the problems that he has so clearly articulated.
So let me try to act as a good host / moderator here and ask a question of Stephen that will then pivot over to Sam. So, Stephen, as far as I know, you are the only one of us three who has actually read the Benedict Option, Rod Dreher's book, expounding on this concept. Sort of stolen from McIntyre. Probably, I was going to say in many ways, but probably just in the one way that it is definitely stolen from McIntyre. So, in reading that book, did you see, sort of in answer to Sam's question, did you see an example of how this could be done or how it has been done? Like, is there an option in, the mind of Rod Dreher to Sam's query?
There is. Unfortunately, this was, I think, my biggest critique of the book would be he did not do enough practical approaches. He sketched out some of the why this is necessary, going at it from more of a religious perspective rather than an ethical or philosophical one. And then he provided one or not one or two. I think he provided like 3 or 4 examples of Christian communities attempting it. Generally, I think he would somewhat escape Sam's critique of the noting the evangelicals in the 70s. In that he did desire the Christians pursuing this Benedict option. He did encourage, like, do not seal yourself off from the world. That's not what this is about. This is a, I'm not sure if he used the language of narrative, but it was more of a, you want to give yourself a certain narrative to live your community in, but it has to be a porous community. It has to be one that you can go out into the world, you can come into the world. In fact, he had I think one of the few examples I actually really distinctly remember. He was interviewing the daughter of a family who at least attempted something like this. And the daughter had actually completely burned out and became an atheist afterwards. And said, like, look, you become so closed and so kind of anti-world that you just kind of go nuts. And said that, like, her siblings she was the oldest and her siblings were starting to demonstrate kind of like similar patterns. And she said, like, look, I wish you best with this. I hope it works out for you, but please make sure to tell people, like, you can't be completely closed off. Otherwise you just kind of lose your way. So I think Sam's critique is valid. And I think there are pushbacks against it. There are kind of encouragements to avoid being completely closed off. That said, I really expected more from the book, if I'm being completely honest. And maybe we could have kind of a mini episode concerning Rod Dreher's approach to the Benedict option.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say there is, obviously the Benedict option manifest is not the evangelical movement. Like, there's a lot of distinction between those two. My concern would more be that when you give kind of a theory and you have a conceptual framework of something that has to be done, absolutely, no questions asked, do this, and then people with egos, with their own problems, attempt to implement it, and they don't have enough practical guidance in doing that, it does some pretty nasty things.
I would agree with you with that. I would be interested. So here's my critique on your critique via evangelicals in the 70s, or I think you could actually get even harsher with your critique and more poignant by pointing out different cults that would, like, completely seal themselves off. I think my critique would be with evangelicals in particular. They were probably still operating under a paradigm that was not virtue. Not to say that they were bad or vicious, but just simply that they weren't going with, MacIntyre's conception of virtue ethics. They were probably going with something closer to Kantian or utilitarian.
Yeah, I think it was more Kantian, honestly.
I think the extension you could throw out with the kind of like some religious movements that go even further and kind of go to full on cult mode, I would say that that's just a dark side of monasteries or what have you, and it has to be done very, very carefully. And again, you have to ensure a certain amount of porousness with your intentional communities. Otherwise, yeah, you're just going to turn into an insane cult.
So far be it from me to defend evangelicals. You know that I'm not the type.
I would never accuse you of such a thing.
Thank you. But I think so. Even if I accept all of Sam's facts about the 70s evangelical movement as true, which I have no idea. But when you were talking about them, Sam, you were bringing up things like they haven't had success and they've regressed, and look at the problems that they've had. Where an argument could be made, one, that a lot of the problems are the same that affect the rest of society in terms of social dissolution, or people leaving the church all across the board, not just the evangelicals, etc., etc. Just that at least some of the negative effects on them as a group affect every group that attempts some sort of cohesive ideology and unified movement together. And the second thing is, what does it mean to have success? Because in one sense, if you take the evangelical argument, at least part of it, at face value, they view themselves as countercultural. The culture is bad. It's in these various ways. They kind of avoid criticizing in other ways. But they feel like they need to build a separate parallel culture to it because there's something wrong with it. And I don't think any of us would say there's something wrong with culture. Like, that's a statement literally everyone can agree with in one way or another. with an argument like McIntyre, and even I would say a less cogent argument like that evangelicals might make about why the culture is bad and why aspects of public society, the public square are bad. If those are right in some way, it does seem like it warrants some kind of action, and especially action that cannot be judged by metrics of success in terms of like winning the culture or taking over America or making America all in your form. A lot of it would seem, would be more survival mode. Like, it seems like you should do something, as opposed to just, I am going to go live in my suburban house and take my kids to soccer practice, go to church once a week, and, work till I get my pension and retire. Like, that seems like an insufficient response. And, a cogent, I've used cogent several times, it's a great word. A comprehensive response is difficult and obviously dangerous the more comprehensive it is, because then you get into more cult-like territory. But I guess what I might see in your argument, or what I would contend for the sake of argument, is that you seem unwilling to give any ground. Like, you seem paralyzed because you don't know what the right thing to do is.
That's an accurate description of me in general. So
I hear you, man.
Paralyzed, not knowing what to do. No, I see what you're saying there, and that is the one thing that I really think that McIntyre brings to the table, which is he articulates why the culture is bad. He doesn't just and it gives a lot more meat behind it than most people who would come before him. Yeah, I don't know.
Sam, have you read A Canticle for Leibowitz?
I have not.
I brought it up a long time ago. You should get it and read it on the plane to England.
Chesterton?
No. It's I forget the guy's name.
The relatively modern one. Relatively, I think.
Yes.
What?
It's a sci-fi.
80s?
Yeah, it's a sci-fi novel. It's like 1950s. Essentially, it's 3 short novellas, each around 1,000 years apart or so. The first one takes place in a post-apocalyptic world. The second one is a new Renaissance post-apocalyptic, and the final one is in future with future technology in which the apocalypse is happening again. And it all follows these monks at this monastery dedicated to Saint Leibowitz, who was an engineer during the Great Apocalypse, and he's trying to preserve human knowledge for the betterment of mankind. And it's just sort of a debate about technology and monasticism and reverence and stuff like that.
That sounds very interesting. Send me a link to it. I'll buy it.
It was partially what inspired After Virtue. I think he mentions it in the prequel, yes, or the
in his original, McIntyre's original sort of thing. Like, imagine a world where all knowledge has been lost, and we only have fragments of texts, and we try and reconstruct philosophy. That's literally Canticle for Leibowitz. He pulls it right from that. But what really strikes me about that book is sort of it puts into practical perspective, I think, what McIntyre views the moral landscape, and like I don't think it would be entirely inaccurate to say that McIntyre is projecting the apocalyptic vision of Canticle for Leibowitz onto modern society and seeing it as a dark age when it isn't quite there yet, something like that. But I would read it because it helps tell you where McIntyre's coming from in terms of, I don't know, I always describe the book as just a very reverent book. Yes, anyway.
I would like to read it. It sounds very fascinating. I've been reading a lot of nonfiction recently, and I would love to read something more whimsical.
Okay.
In the sense that it is not economics.
Yes.
So, Brevin, to your point on his exaggerating, maybe a little, but honestly, I mean, and maybe it's always easy to say, like, oh man, times like these, they're awful. No one's talking. Politics are awful. I mean, politics has been terrible for the last 4,000 years or whatever. But there is something in the kind of political debate sphere. Maybe I'm just looking at it from politics, but also, I mean, just in general, philosophical conversations, ethical, political, religious, all of these do seem to be really suffering from a very distinct lack of dialogue. And maybe his diagnosis isn't the most accurate. Maybe he is exaggerating a little bit, but honestly, if you ask anyone what ethics is, they will say, "Oh, it's discerning right and wrong," and they're not necessarily wrong, but they're missing a large part of it. It's like determining what the best story is and how to best live your life. It is much closer to philosophy than people kind of give it credit for. So I don't know, like it does strike me that he really does have a point, that his conception of ethics, the Aristotelian conception of ethics, really is kind of foreign to the general understanding.
And that yeah, like how do you? I don't know how to bridge that gap, because even for the most interested people in this, like, we're still coming from this culture that he's critiquing to its core. Like, can we even? Because it sounds dramatic, but can we even save ourselves from this, let alone the next generation?
I think it would be a very difficult thing to do, certainly, but with the sort of intentional communities he is talking about, I think it would be possible. Difficult, yes, and again, like, I think the word intentional is, ironically enough, a very intentional one. You couldn't just accidentally slide into it. You'd have to have people that are all on the same page, probably all living near each other to the point where they can just, oh Jesus, as much as I hate this cliche, the doing life together. But like, I think that would be what would be required in order to kind of pull what he wants, in order to pull off what he's imagining right now. And that is what Rod Dreher does get into with the Benedict option. It's just, I wish he expounded upon it a bit more.
The one other bit of fluff that I have on McIntyre is I went to a talk down in Rhode Island with Chris, actually.
Oh yeah.
And George Weigel was there, of First Things and various other publications, Ethics and Public Policy Center, I think. But it was him and two other panelists talking about the Benedict option and its viability. They didn't get into too many details, but the absolutely hilarious thing was two of the three panelists both brought up different saints. Like, I don't think we need the Benedict option. I think we need the Theophilus option. And it was just like, lol, you're just all trying to write books. You are too late to a good idea, my friends. Anyway, it was amusing.
That does sound like a fun talk, though.
That would be fascinating. Did they have any good points? Like, did they have any good ideas?
Oh, no.
Dang it.
No one knows what to do.
We're all screwed.
Yep.
Well, I mean, to be fair, like, and this is, I think most of the conversation around the Benedict option is happening from a mostly religious perspective, which to an extent makes sense, given that it's, related to a monastic that set up monasteries. But I think people are really trying to wrestle with what it means to be Christian in a post-Christian society, and I think that is a very non-trivial, dicey topic that you go too far one way, you become a cult. You go too far the other, you fade into non-existence and moralistic therapeutic deism.
Yep. It's almost like our discourse is broken or something.
Something like that.
Well, McIntyre was great. I would not have read this without you guys.
No, nor would I.
Same.
Never would have.
Very, very happy that we made it through to the end. You're definitely right, Stephen, that it starts off with throwing punches left and right, smacking down people, and then it does kind of peter out a little bit, kind of lacks the end punch. I mean, the last line is great, but not exactly a substitute for a parallel philosophy.
Before that, we have 150 pages where he's speaking Greek and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you're just like,
that's actually that's the Dark Ages that you need. Dark Ages are chapter 11 through 15.
The Dark Ages are Homeric heroicism.
Real though. I think if I were teaching an ethics class and I had to do like a TLDR of McIntyre, I would say read the first 7 chapters and then read the last 2.
8 is the chapter about.
Well, 8 is him styling on sociology.
Yeah,
that's 8, right? Yeah, so read the first 8 and then read the last 2 or 3.
The thing that I truly love is, as he's in chapter 8, just dunking on all these bad statisticians and sociologists, is I'm taking an intro to stats class and trying to learn, what is math? Can I use it to discover truth? And McIntyre, meanwhile, is like, nope.
Can't do nothing with it. Oh man.
No, cool. I definitely enjoyed this, and despite I'm walking out of it still not knowing what I feel, and I think I'll spend the next few years discerning that. So that's I think a good thing.
So you'll have all your final opinions about things when you're 23. That's awesome, dude. That's
how that works
for most people.
Oh yeah, no, he's ahead of the curve.
No, I'll be 25 in 3 years. So there's that. So I'm slowing down, okay? And then I'll just write a book, and then call it like, I don't know.
Saint Seraphim Option, where we just nuke everything.
Yes, that's the name of this episode. The Saint Seraphim Option.
Oh yes. But no, I don't know. It's gonna take a while to process this. All I know is I was looking through some papers I wrote from this last year of undergrad, and I realized that McIntyre was the author I cited the most by far. For the last 2 quarters, I cited him in like 95% of my papers.
Nice.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Just
For
because
real,
it's so easy. If you're writing anything in politics or philosophy or whatever, when you're like, I need an extra 500 words to just tack on a paragraph of, oh, by the way, the modern experiment had to fail, and just throw it in there.
Well done.
I have 2 comments on that. The first comment is Dr. Henry would frown upon you, but also smile.
I was gonna say that Dr. Henry he would both smile as he shook his head and then gave me like an 80.
Yeah.
Well, the one paper I didn't do it in was his, but
Stephen, Dr. Henry's thing is that if you learn enough in one class that you can just cross-apply it to everything in college, then you haven't learned anything.
Ooh, that's actually, I feel like that's a good point.
And the second comment that I had, though, was for all of my English papers, I found this little quote in a book in Oxford that allowed me to justify basically making whatever type of interpretive claim I wanted, and I just copy-pasted that to like every single English essay that I wrote.
Smart man.
I love college.
Yep.
Good times.
Good times. Speaking of college is the place where people get very angry and upset because it's the real world, apparently, and everything is very high stakes. Speaking of high stakes, let's go to rants. Steven.
Oh, no.
Oh, boy. Oh, buddy. Let me think. Well, okay, so I have two rants. I could your thought on the real world gave me one of my classic rants. I could go on college, or I could go on The Road by Cormac McCarthy.
I think,
choose your own adventure, boys.
I vote
college.
McCarthy. Turn to page 43.
I don't have the book with me anymore.
It looks like we're doing both, actually. Steven, go.
Okay, I'm going to do it really fast. First, Cormac McCarthy's The Road. Brilliant book. Excellent. A coworker lent it to me on a couple weeks ago. I finished up another book I was reading, picked it up Friday, could not put it down. I was done within a couple of days. It was brilliant book. Very, very depressing. With Canticle for Leibowitz, as well as many other post-apocalyptic novels, they're all predicated on the idea that humanity has at least a shot at reestablishing everything, at kind of building back. With The Road, that is just not on the cards at all. And he does a very good job at portraying 2 humans attempting to find hope where there is just simply no hope. And does it in a very brilliant and endearing way that is still very difficult to go through. It's very well done. Would highly recommend. People will say it's a dark book, and it certainly is. It's a very dark piece of fiction, but still has a few just little nuggets that kind of show a little gold in that darkness. So would highly recommend. And then my rant for college, real world. So what is the ontological meaning of real world when you apply that to saying that some certain experience is the real world or not the real world? And I contend that college is indeed the real world. You are, if anything, so oftentimes, especially the small Christian college, is kind of pointed to and said like, oh no, this is not the real world when you're out in the real world. I would contend that it is more real than the quote-unquote real world, given that it is at least attempting in its own way, however flawed it may be, to model the kingdom of God, to live out that Christian experience. And in a Platonic way, this is a more real thing. The kingdom of God is far more real than anything else you will ever experience. And so I say to you, good sir, that is real. That's about that. I have a whole essay I actually wrote on that, and I could read it for days, but I won't subject you to. Honestly, we've brought up the college experience enough. We should do a mini episode just on college and the various ills and benefits that come
I think
with
that would be entirely gratuitous. What's the word for like self-flagellating and something else? But
Penance.
But maybe. but maybe. Actually, Steven, you are far enough out of it that you actually would have some good opinions. I'm like a little bit out of it, and then Sam is still right in the mix of it. So
I'm
good.
not even done. No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sam, speaking of not being done, it's your turn
Yeah.
for a rant.
Yeah. Well, I forgot there were rants somehow. Did I give my rant about American justice last week?
I don't think
you
so.
did.
Cool. American culture, as McIntyre referenced, is entirely flawed to its core in the way that it frames individuals humans as individuals, and forces them to basically will to power against one another. And no more is that clear than in the justice system. I've been going through an experience in an internship recently where I'm working in a court. The thing that's been most startling to me as personally is just the mechanization of justice on such a large scale. I'm working in a family court, and so I could say that emotionally, an extraordinarily painful experience is watching family discourse, family interactions, and very, very broken situations mechanized, systematized, and then ultimately bureaucratized by administrators. It totally removes any element of what it means to be an individual and what it means to create or to make people act in a virtuous way or to assist people in acting in a virtuous way. And so I guess from this walking out of it, I'm seeing that this is just another area where we are deeply flawed is in this system that pits individuals against one another and pits them against a higher government. And just the amount of assumptions to get to that point that you have to make are entirely dehumanizing. Was that aggressive enough?
That was pretty aggressive.
That was well said. I like that.
I'm definitely going to play the Law and Order Special Victims Unit. Dun dun. Here, so
well, please do.
Please. Oh yeah. Anyway, so and I'm not sure if it's actually that bad. It's just personally watching it day in day out. It's a little draining. My manager sat myself and another intern down and had us watch a TED talk about secondhand trauma the other day because she's like, you guys need to watch out for this because it's real.
Hey man, well, I'm sorry you're having to deal with that, but hopefully you will have some of the tools of virtue that McIntyre has bestowed so graciously upon you. I mean, in all seriousness, though, that does sound very sucky.
Yeah. And that's not to say it's sucky. I'm honestly very grateful for the opportunity, and it is a good opportunity, a good view of that system, and especially in considering law school, I think it's a really valuable experience. But there is that con to it, is that you just kind of question our entire system of justice.
Oof.
Yeah.
So, for my rant, sort of right along that that serious note, let's talk about Prime Day 2019. 2 days of sales and something that rhymes with sales. Anyway, it's great. But with Prime Day, I have basically zero interest. Partially is because I just don't really like things. I don't really accumulate stuff, which now that I think about it in like a consumerist society basically means I'm not really alive. But whatever.
We already all knew that.
Yeah, we all knew that. But also, I think because I lived in Africa playing with like bows and arrows and sticks and termite clay through all of high school, I kind of missed that like mall phase where you learn to like to shop. So that's helpful, but also means I don't get to participate in the massive multiplayer online experience that is Prime Day. But anyway, like, why can't they do something like actually good? Just like give like 50% off of all of books, and not like Kindle books, which are garbage, but like actual books. I was looking on like their book section, and literally nothing there. It's like two like trashy travel things, and then like Bruchco for some reason is super cheap. Do you guys?
Bruchco? What's that?
I read it.
You guys were evangelical adjacent. It's like a young Christian guy, evangelical, goes into the Brazilian rainforest and gets adopted by an undiscovered, uncontacted tribe after like nearly dying a bazillion times. It's actually like a decent story, but then the other one
is very interesting, and I think it's a good exploration in like if you're going to do cross-cultural outreach in like a ministry standpoint, how
you need to wear a loincloth is
well, you need to wear a loincloth. Well, his point was you need to understand the culture in some way.
Yeah. You need to engage the culture, change the world. But this is still my rant.
Yeah,
and
you
the
do.
other the other book that was sort of on sale on the Amazon page was the God Delusion. So my figure is that they're just kind of trying to hit all demographics.
My
with
gosh,
their
the
book
God
selection.
Delusion. There are good atheist books out there. Give the people some Mackey. Give them some Flew. Give them good atheists. Give them Nietzsche. Don't give them Dawkins. My goodness.
I'm pretty sure Dawkins is the best. I don't think there's anyone else. I saw this YouTube video where he just destroyed this college student. It was great. But anyway, yeah, Prime Day, whatever. I don't care.
Yeah,
That's my
I'll say hi to him for you guys.
Actually, no. By
you
Wycliffe
could.
Hall, where you're going, his house is nearby.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, you know that. Okay. Well,
Oh
anyway.
my gosh.
Yes.
Yeah, he'll see me walk out of Wycliffe and just be like, and won't. So,
What?
Yeah.
well,
yeah,
Wycliffe Hall is the Christian hall.
Oh, yeah. It's like the evangelical one that's not even a real college. It's just a hall.
Yeah, there is that.
Wow.
Yes. Actually, this is very tangential, probably going to be cut. But one of the big scholar people there at Wycliffe Hall, one of their top folks, is a Bonhoeffer scholar. But what's interesting is, and this was sort of before I was fully aware of the different sections of Christianity and their fights with each other. So there's the conservative Bonhoeffer people who sort of claim him for their side, and I forget the guy, Eric Metaxas, maybe?
Metaxas. Yeah, he did the big biography of him.
Who wrote the big biography, and then this guy wrote a counter biography, which just interprets him in all his weirdness, which Metaxas ignores. And granted, Bonhoeffer was weird. I'm personally in the camp to just count him in the section where I just don't like him because of reasons, and he was weird, and he liked who's that guy who had a bunch of mistresses? He was a theologian.
The popes?
No. Couple centuries. Hey, your insult's like 3 centuries too late. So.
Sorry, it's still too soon. It's still too soon.
All right. So, any final words of advice for our broad listening audience as we finish up After Virtue and potentially transition into a new season of the problem with reading, season 2?
For the record, I mean, we
2.
do still need to go over the postscript and the index.
That can be a
and
special
appendix.
episode after we do some regular article episodes, which we need to figure out if we can even do this while Sam's in England. But
that's a good point. That's a
we'll
good point.
see.
I would say I think if there's one takeaway, it's virtue is passed on both in a community and through a narrative. And I think those are my two big takeaways from this: is that virtue cannot be passed on, or virtue cannot be practiced outside of a community, and virtue cannot be practiced outside of a narrative.
Yes.
Sam?
That is kind of my takeaway: is the importance of virtue and how to pursue it. I mean, you guys know that I am not incredibly well versed in philosophy. I'm just not. And in reading MacIntyre, I definitely am at least interested in the virtue ethics narrative. So there's that. Virtue ethics is good. I think it's, even if you don't go full on Benedict, I think it's still a better way to live your life.
What about you, Brevin?
I think the aspect of MacIntyre that I found most interesting was a sense of sort of revitalizing my deadened, somewhat cynical view of the study of English and literature. I think MacIntyre does it in a very good way, a very careful way, bringing up the importance of stories, narratives, literature, and also as the core stories of different cultures, and sort of revealing the philosophy hidden within them. And in undergrad English classes, you can get pretty cynical about stuff, but I think there's a reason we have good books, and MacIntyre helped remind me of why we read them.
Yeah, I totally agree with that as well. As I enjoyed how he was able to dive into the narrative and not go full on narrative theory, which is really important because good literature is good.
Damn, well said.
Absolutely.
All right, and on that note, for everyone here at the Problem with Reading podcast, I'm Brevin.
I'm Steven.
And I'm Sam.
And we will see you sometime in the indeterminate future.
Practice some virtue.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. After Virtue. Hold on, boys. Cool.
Okay. Well, listen to the YouTube video, guys.
Will do.
It's very important.
Oh yeah. I want to kind of watch that right now, actually.
Oh yeah. Let's all pull that up.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have it paused at 0 seconds. Let me know when you guys start it.
All right, hold on. I need to get through an ad here. All right, I am ready to go.
3, 2,
Give me
1.
No.
Oh.
Okay, I'm ready.
3, 2, 1.
This is already great.
I love the white suit too. Oh,
I know, right?
Wow, he just looks heartless.
he really does. He looks
he's
like a
going around,
serial
like,
killer.
breaking people's necks. It's great.